I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just listened to my son tell me that if I wanted to keep living under his roof, I'd better start acting like I worked there. My name's Walter Pruitt. I'm 61 years old, and 4 months ago, my daughter-in-law stood in my doorway and told me dinner needed to be on the table by 6 every night if I wanted to keep things peaceful around here. I'd been living in that house for 2 months by then, cooking, doing laundry, disappearing into the guest room whenever they had people over, and for 2 months I told myself it was just what family did for each other. That morning, I packed my suitcase with steady hands. I didn't slam a single drawer. By noon, I was gone. 11 days later, my son called me 26 times in one afternoon. Before I tell you how it got to that point, I want you to picture the spring before all this started, because that's where it really begins. I'd sold the house on Linden Court 3 weeks earlier. 26 years in that house. My wife Carol and I raised our son there, and after she passed 2 years back, I rattled around those 4 bedrooms like a marble in a shoebox. The garage still had her gardening gloves hanging on a nail by the workbench. I couldn't make myself take them down, so eventually I just stopped going in the garage at all. My son Gregory called me on a Sunday in March. "Dad, why are you still up there by yourself? We've got the space. Come stay with us." His voice had that warm, easy certainty he'd had since he was a kid trying to talk me into something. I believed him completely. I thought it was an invitation, a son wanting his father close. The drive from my place outside Dayton down to their house in Frisco, Texas took me a day and a half, with an overnight stop in Memphis. I'd been a contractor for 31 years before I retired, building custom homes mostly, and old habits don't quit easy. I left early to beat traffic, planned my route around weather, called ahead to confirm the hotel. Carol used to laugh at me for it, said I planned vacations like military operations. The house in Frisco was new construction, the kind with a 3-car garage and a kitchen island the size of a pool table. My son's wife, Brittany, met me in the driveway with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, though I didn't clock that the first day. Gregory hugged me hard. "Dad, you're gonna love it here." Brittany showed me to my room, the smallest of the 5, tucked off the kitchen past the pantry. "It's actually perfect," she said. "You're right by the coffee maker." I laughed. I thought she was joking. It took me about 10 weeks to understand she wasn't. The first week, I made breakfast exactly once, because I was up at 5:30, the way I'd been every day of my working life, and the kitchen was just sitting there. Gregory came down, ate the eggs, said that hit the spot, Dad, and left for work. The next morning he came down at the same time and just looked at the stove. Didn't say anything. I made eggs again. By Thursday it wasn't a question anymore. It was just what happened at 6:15 every weekday. Nobody asked. Nobody thanked me past that first day. It just became the shape of the morning, the way water finds the low part of a yard and just stays there. Brittany started adding to it without ever quite asking. A Saturday cookout for Gregory's coworkers. "Walter, could you just handle the grill? You're so much better at it than Greg." Turned into me feeding 14 people I'd never met, while Gregory stood by the cooler telling a guy from his office, "Yeah, my dad's a grill master. Loves doing this kind of stuff." I was standing right there with tongs in my hand. He loves doing this kind of stuff. Like I'd shown up to that cookout with an apron on out of pure personal joy, and not because his wife asked me 3 days earlier, and I hadn't found a polite way to say no. I called my late wife's sister Diane that night, told her maybe I was reading too much into it. She'd known me 40 years. "Walter," she said, "you built houses for 3 decades. You know when a foundation's not level. Trust that same gut." I told myself I'd give it time. Family takes time to settle. By the second month, laundry showed up. Not asked for, just appeared. Folded clothes of Gregory stacked neatly outside my door on a Tuesday like a delivery. I washed it. Old habit, the same way you check the mailbox even when you're not expecting anything. The next Tuesday, another pile. No note. No thanks, Dad. Just an assumption left on the floor. Around then, I'd signed up for a Tuesday evening woodworking class at the rec center in Frisco. I'd had a shop in my garage back home for 20 years and missed the smell of sawdust more than I let on. First week I went. It was good. Quiet men, sharp tools, the particular piece of making something with your hands instead of fixing other people's problems. Second week, Brittany caught me grabbing my keys. "You're heading out? Greg's got that work call till 6. Somebody needs to get dinner going." I put the keys down. I never went back to that class. A few weeks later, Gregory stood in the kitchen doorway looking at the backsplash. "The grout's looking pretty grimy up there." Not a question. A status report, the kind you'd give a contractor, not your own father. I'd spent 31 years on job sites, and I knew exactly what it sounded like when somebody had quietly decided you worked for them. I just nodded and kept wiping the counter. Brittany's mother, Pamela, came to visit in late September, drove 4 hours with a peach cobbler she'd made from scratch. Sweet woman, genuinely. Hugged Gregory like she hadn't seen him in years. Over dinner I'd cooked, of course. She mentioned, unprompted, that her late husband never had to think about a hot meal once in 40 years of marriage. I just took care of it. Made me feel needed, you know? That was my whole joy. She smiled right at me across the table like she was handing me a gift. I smiled back and said nothing. Later that night, walking past the hallway, I heard Gregory's voice low, talking to Brittany. See, that's how it's supposed to work. Pamela never made it a thing. He wasn't talking to me. But I heard every word, and I understood exactly what he meant by it. I found Brittany alone in the laundry room a few days after that and asked her straight, "Do you think I'm doing too much around here?" She frowned like I'd asked her something in a foreign language. "Greg's never been disrespectful to you, Walter." That was the whole defense. No rudeness, therefore no problem. I thought about the pile of laundry on the floor, the woodworking class I'd quietly given up, the 14 strangers I'd grilled for without a single introduction. That Saturday I didn't cook breakfast, made coffee for myself, sat at the little desk in my room, read the paper on my tablet. Gregory came down, opened the fridge, stood there a second, shut it, said nothing. But something in how he looked at me after that changed. Cooler. Like I'd broken an agreement I never signed. I picked a quiet Wednesday, Gregory at work late, the house calm, and asked Brittany to sit with me at the table. "I don't mind helping out," I told her, "but I'd like to be asked. Not have things just land on me." She got that guarded look people get when they think they're about to be accused of something. "Has Greg said something to you?" "No. He's actually told me more than once how much he appreciates having me here." Something shifted in her face at that. She heard the thing under the words. "Walter, I don't understand. You're not working for us. You're family." I let that sit a second. Family who sleeps in the room closest to the kitchen because it's convenient. Family who skipped his class so dinner's ready at 6. Family who washes another man's laundry because it shows up on the floor without a word. She picked her phone back up. Conversation over. That night I lay in that narrow bed and thought for the first time in plain words about leaving. But I'd sold the house. There was nowhere obvious to go. That thought kept me there longer than anything else did. Not love, not duty. Just the practical fact of having made a decision I couldn't easily undo. And underneath that, some stubborn hope I was wrong about all of it. Then came the promotion. Gregory made regional sales director the 3rd week of October. A job he'd been chasing 2 years, 6 figures, a corner office in Plano. Brittany threw her arms around him in the kitchen, genuinely happy, and watching them, I felt that particular ache of seeing your kid loved the way you'd hoped someone would love them. That part was real. That part I never doubted. Gregory wanted to celebrate with a dinner party. Saturday. 15 guests, his new boss included, a man named Harold Briggs, plus coworkers and a couple of old college friends. Brittany turned to me before she'd even finished the thought. "Dad, you'll handle the food, right? You're the best cook we know." I set down the dish towel. "Handle it how? Plan the menu, or cook it myself?" "Cook it, obviously." "And will I be sitting down to eat with everyone?" Something flickered across her face. Not quite guilt, more like the look of someone hearing an arrangement said out loud for the first time. "It's Greg's boss, Walter. It might be a little awkward." Awkward. I picked the towel back up. "Sure," I said. "I'll help." But something in me had already shifted, quiet and final, the way things shift after you've been patient for a long, long time. The menu came by text Monday. 7 dishes, bulleted, no room for negotiation. Smoked brisket, garlic mashed potatoes, green beans almondine, a wedge salad, deviled eggs as a starter, cornbread, banana pudding for dessert. Tuesday a follow-up. Harold loves a good gumbo if you can squeeze it in. Gregory knew his new boss's favorite dish. He never once asked if I'd made it before. I had. Carol used to request it every Mardi Gras. But that wasn't the point. Wednesday, Brittany appeared in my doorway with the careful, oversized cheerfulness of someone asking a big favor while pretending it's small. "Dad, would it just be easier if you stayed back in the kitchen during the party? Kind of run things from there?" "Easier for who? It'll just flow better. Greg's people don't really know you." I looked at my son's wife. I'd built the deck this family grilled on. I'd driven 9 hours through a snowstorm to see my son walk across a graduation stage. And now I was being asked to stay invisible at a party in a house where I cooked 3 meals a day, every day. I understand, I said. But I was already counting 7 dishes, 15 place settings, one man doing it alone, and not one seat saved at that table for him. Thursday night, after they'd gone to bed, I sat in my room with the lamp low. I pulled up an old text thread with Carol from the summer before her diagnosis. We'd been planning a trip up to the Smokies, and she'd sent me a photo of a cabin with the caption, "You deserve some good mornings, Walt." I'd laughed at the time. Reading it now hit different. She'd always seen me clear, even when I couldn't see myself. I called my daughter Renee, who lives 2 hours away in Tulsa. She picked up on the second ring, like she always does. I told her everything: the laundry, the woodworking class, the word awkward. Long pause. Dad, do you want me to call Greg? No, I need to do this myself. Okay. Another pause. You know my guest room's just sitting empty. She said it the way Gregory had said, "Come stay with us," except hers didn't come with a 7-dish menu attached. After we hung up, I looked up apartment listings in Frisco. 1 bedrooms, the kind of small place where the only dishes in the sink belong to you. My pension and what I'd put away from selling the Linden Courthouse covered it easy. I just never let myself think past the assumption that I was supposed to be here. That was the night I stopped telling myself I had no choice. Diane called Wednesday morning, 3 days before the party. She'd driven down to Dallas to see her grandkids, said she could swing by Frisco for coffee. We sat in a diner booth for 2 hours, and I told her everything I'd been carrying. Not just the facts, the loneliness underneath it, the particular kind that comes from spending your whole life being useful to people you love, and then realizing somebody stopped seeing the difference between useful and loved. She set her coffee down. "Walter, you are not the hired help. You are his father." Simple sentence. Landed like a brick anyway. We were still at the diner when Brittany came to pick me up. Said she had errands nearby, but I think she just didn't trust me to find my own way back by then. She came in for 5 minutes, bright and friendly, and Diane was polite right back. As we got up to leave, Brittany turned to her. "Diane, you free Saturday? We're throwing Greg a little party. He just made regional director." Diane glanced at me. Quick, half a second. I gave her the smallest nod. "I'd love that," she said. In the car, Brittany chattered about centerpieces, and which caterer she'd considered before deciding the homemade food would be so much more personal, you know. She had no idea she'd just invited the one person in Texas who knew exactly what had been happening in that house for 3 months. Friday night, I was in the kitchen at 9, going through the pantry. Brisket rubbed and resting in the fridge. Timeline mapped out for all 7 dishes. What could be prepped tonight, what needed the morning, what had to be plated last. 31 years running job sites teaches you how to manage a complicated operation by yourself. Brittany came in quiet. Gregory was out grabbing extra folding chairs. She stood by the island a while before she said anything, which wasn't like her. "Dad, tomorrow really matters to Greg." She'd clearly rehearsed it. "I need you focused just on the kitchen tomorrow. Don't come out and mingle with people." I set down my pen. "Brittany, what are you saying?" She wouldn't quite look at me. "If that feels like too much, maybe it'd be easier if you stayed somewhere else this weekend." Took a little break. A little break. Packaged up like a kindness. I looked at her a long moment. She was 33 years old, standing in her own kitchen, telling her father-in-law to work in silence or disappear, and she found a way to say it that sounded like she was doing me a favor. I turned off the burner under the brisket. "All right," I said. "I understand." I walked to my room and shut the door. At 11, I pulled the suitcase out from under the bed. I didn't throw anything in it. I packed the way I always had. Shirts folded, not balled up, toiletries zipped in the front pocket. Carol used to say I could be ready to leave for anywhere on 20 minutes' notice. I didn't know that was a skill I'd actually need someday. There were things I left behind. The apron I'd bought my second week at a kitchen store on Main Street. I hung it back on its hook by the stove. The spare house key on its ring, set on the counter, and one folded note on the cutting board. I thought hard about what to write. Not a speech. One honest line. "I cooked because I loved you. I won't keep doing it out of fear of being asked to leave again." I called Renee at 11:30. She picked up before the second ring finished. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I'm leaving in the morning. Can you find me a hotel near you?" Half a second of silence. Already looking. No drama, no "are you sure?" She trusted me to know my own mind, same as always. Saturday, 6:50 a.m. The house had that particular thick quiet of early mornings in somebody else's home. I carried the suitcase down the hall with both hands, wheels lifted so they wouldn't roll and wake anyone. Brittany's door was shut. Gregory was already out for his Saturday run. I set the bag in the entryway and walked into the kitchen one last time. The note sat on the cutting board exactly where I'd left it. The apron hung on its hook. Morning light came through the window over the sink, catching the edge of the brisket still resting in the fridge. The 7 half-prepped dishes waiting for hands that wouldn't be there. I picked up my jacket and walked out the front door. I didn't look back. The drive to the hotel took 11 minutes. I checked in, rode up to the 3rd floor, set my suitcase on the rack, and sat on the edge of the bed. Then I did something I hadn't done in 3 months. I just sat. No list, no task. Nobody downstairs needing anything from me. I breathed slow, all the way down, the kind of breath you take when you realize how long you'd been holding the last one. I turned my phone off. I know how that evening went, only because Diane told me the next morning over breakfast, blow by blow. The porch light on at 6. Brittany in a navy dress she'd altered for the occasion. Gregory in a blazer, working the room with the easy confidence of a man having the best night of his career. The kitchen, dark, no smell of brisket. The 7 dishes sitting in the fridge as raw ingredients, untouched. Brittany found the note, then the apron, then stood there 4 full minutes before she called a barbecue place on Preston Road for emergency catering. Harold Briggs arrived around 6:45, 50-something, silver at the temples, the kind of man who notices everything and announces almost none of it. He shook Gregory's hand and looked around. Something smells good, or wait, is it still coming? Catered it instead, Gregory said. Keeps things easy. Harold smiled politely, but his face was already doing something his mouth wasn't. A few minutes later, near the drinks table, Brittany mentioned her father-in-law does most of the cooking around here. Is he joining us tonight? Gregory, smooth. He's actually out of town this weekend. Took some personal time. Huh, Harold said. I was looking forward to meeting him. She talks about him a lot. Diane was standing 6 feet away the whole time. She'd spent 2 hours in a diner booth on Thursday, hearing exactly what those 3 months had cost me. She set her glass down on the side table. Actually, she said, Walter left this morning. He's staying at a hotel nearby. The little cluster of people near the bar went still, the way a room goes still when someone says something true out loud. Last night, Diane went on, calm, not raising her voice. Brittany told him he could either stay back in the kitchen during the party tonight or take the weekend somewhere else. He chose to leave. Nobody gasped. The room just absorbed it, the way a floor absorbs a dropped weight. Gregory's jaw worked once. Diane, I appreciate you looking out for him, but this isn't really. Harold put a hand on Gregory's arm, light, easy. We don't need to get into it tonight. He smiled, turned, walked toward the bar. That was all. No scene. But something in that room had rearranged itself permanently, and everyone there knew it. The party limped on in the technical sense. People held plates of catered barbecue. Conversation picked back up in pieces. But the night had already decided what kind of night it was going to be. Harold left about 35 minutes later, said goodbye to Gregory with the same warmth he'd arrived with, which told my son nothing and everything at once. By 9:40 the house was empty except for the 2 of them, and Diane, who stayed to help stack the catering trays. A kindness that was also, everybody understood, a kind of witness. When she finally said goodnight, Brittany sat down on the kitchen stool and picked the note back up off the counter. Read it twice. Gregory stood in the hallway entrance. Neither of them said a single word. My phone was off until Sunday morning. I turned it on not because I'd resolved anything, just because it had been a full day, and I figured Renee might be worrying. The screen lit up before it even finished loading, notification after notification stacking up. 11 missed calls from Gregory, 2 from Brittany, 1 from a number I didn't recognize, a voicemail from Diane. Just wanted you to know you're okay. Call when you're ready. I lay in that hotel bed and tried to figure out what I actually felt. Not triumphant. Not even relieved, exactly. Something quieter, the particular stillness of a man who's done the hard right thing and is now just sitting with what comes after. I called Renee. She's been calling me too, she said before I even asked. I told her you're safe and I'm not telling her where. She sounded scared, Dad. But scared's different from sorry. She's scared you're gone. She hasn't once asked herself why. That afternoon, Brittany finally got through to Renee. Cried on the phone, said she didn't understand how it got to this point. Said Greg needed his dad back, that the house felt wrong without me. Renee, who has never once sugarcoated anything in her 34 years, told her flat out, That's the problem, Brittany. You've been managing around Dad this whole time. Not with him. There's a difference, and he's the only one who's been feeling it. The calls kept stacking up. I stayed 11 days at that hotel before I moved into a one-bedroom I'd signed a lease on by Wednesday. 400 square feet, second floor, a little kitchen window that looked out over a courtyard, with an empty bird feeder somebody had given up on. I counted the missed calls the morning. I finally turned the ringer back on for good. 26. 18 from Gregory, 6 from Brittany, 2 from numbers that turned out to be mutual friends. Brittany had apparently recruited to plead her case. And 1 more from Diane, with a text underneath it. The party was exactly as interesting as you'd expect. Call me when you're ready. I didn't call anybody back that first morning. I drove straight to the apartment complex, signed the lease, took the keys from the property manager. A no-nonsense woman named Sherry, who didn't ask a single question about my circumstances, which I appreciated more than she'll ever know. I called Diane that afternoon, and she walked me through the whole party, steady and factual, not trying to wound anybody, just bearing witness. When she finished, I sat with it a minute. You didn't have to say anything. I know. But Gregory was building a story about you in front of people who didn't know any better. I just told the other one. That evening, I called Renee. What's next for you, Dad? Signed the lease Thursday. Small place, but it's good. And there's a woodshop guild that meets Tuesday nights I already looked up. Quiet on her end, then a laugh. Not loud, but the kind that means something real. Good, she said. Go build something. The following Monday, Gregory walked into his new corner office, expecting the start of something. Harold Briggs was already at his desk by 8:15. They passed each other near the coffee station around 9. Morning, Harold said. Same tone he always used, different eye contact. The kind of shift that happens when an image somebody was holding gets quietly revised. They'd had lunch together every Monday for the last 7 months. They didn't that day, or the next one. Gregory mentioned it to Brittany that night, standing in front of the open fridge, with takeout cooling on the counter behind him. Harold's acting weird with me. She didn't look up from her mug. Weird how? I don't know. Distant. It'll pass. She didn't say anything else. It hadn't in fact passed. Not by the time I heard about it weeks later. Some things you can manage your way out of. The impression you leave in a room isn't always one of them. Brittany found me at the hotel that Thursday. Renee had given her the name, not the room number, and she'd asked at the front desk. They called up. I told them to send her up. We sat in the small lobby on the 3rd floor. She was holding the note, the fold worn soft from being carried around for days. She sat down across from me and didn't perform anything. No prepared speech. Just looked at me and said, Dad, I'm sorry. I let the pause sit. 31 years on job sites teaches you that the gap after an apology tells you more than the apology itself. Sorry for what? I asked her. She took a breath. I saw what was useful about you being there, and I told myself that was the same as family. I think I was scared to look any closer, because if I did, I'd have had to look at some other things too. She didn't finish that sentence. She didn't need to. I'd watched my son fall for this woman 15 years ago, and I understood, sitting there, that the harm she'd done me wasn't simple carelessness. She'd been managing her own fear a long time, and I'd been one of the things she used to do it. That didn't make it right. It made it human. I love you, Brittany, I said. That hasn't changed, but I won't live that way again. Not for anybody. She nodded. Her eyes were wet. She didn't argue. That, too, was something. The 26th call came on a Friday night around 8:40. I was in the hotel chair with a book and a cup of coffee, and when the name lit up the screen, I let it sit a second before answering Gregory. Dad, he said, and that was new too. Not Pop, not Dad the way he'd always said it. Just careful, formal. He didn't apologize. I hadn't expected him to. Men like Gregory don't usually have that particular sentence ready to hand. But he was quiet in a way I hadn't heard from him before. I didn't think it would go like this, he finally said. I know, I told him. I let the silence run a second, then said the thing I'd actually wanted to say. Gregory, what matters to me isn't what happened between you and me this weekend. It's that your wife felt like she couldn't just tell you the truth without there being consequences for somebody. That's what I need you to sit with. He didn't answer right away. Then the line went quiet, and he didn't call back that night. I didn't expect him to, but I meant it, and I believed it would land somewhere eventually, even if he wasn't ready to hear it yet. Renee flew out the next Saturday morning. I picked her up at DFW, that same familiar walk through arrivals, carry-on rolling behind her, the unhurried pace of somebody who's seen enough real emergencies in an ER to know this wasn't one. She hugged me a long time. The kind of hug where you can feel somebody checking that you're solid. We drove to the apartment, and she walked the whole 400 square feet like she was inspecting a job site, running a hand along the counter, testing the window latch. "Good light in here," she said. "You could put a chair right there." We spent the afternoon at an estate sale and a secondhand furniture shop off Main. A table, 2 chairs, a reading lamp, a bookshelf. She kept trying to add things, a coat rack, a side table, and I kept telling her no. I wanted only what I'd actually chosen. Fill it up slow, the way you fill a life you're really living instead of one you just landed in. At the hardware store, I stopped at a pegboard near the front, with a starter set of hand tools hanging on it. The same kind Carol used to keep in our garage back on Linden Court. I bought the set, mounted a strip of board above the little work table I'd set up by the window. Not the same tools, but mine. That night, Renee and I cooked dinner together in that tiny kitchen. Nothing fancy, pasta, and a bottle of red, window cracked to the October air. I sat down at my own table, in my own chair, and ate a meal I'd made because I wanted to, with someone who actually saw me do it. 3 weeks after the party, Brittany told me she'd started seeing a counselor. Said it careful, a little nervous, the way people talk about things they've been rehearsing. She's helping me see some patterns I didn't realize I had. I was in my kitchen making coffee, looking out at the courtyard where I'd finally restocked that bird feeder. "I'm glad," I told her, and I meant every word of it. "I don't know where things stand with me and Greg right now," she added. "You don't have to know yet," I said, a breath on her end. "Dad, did you know before you left that it would turn out like this?" I thought about it honestly. No, I just knew I couldn't stay. Quiet for a second. I think that took more than I understood at the time. I watched a cardinal land on the feeder, dip its beak, take off again. Didn't feel like courage in the moment, I told her. Just felt like the last true thing left to do. The first Tuesday in November, I walked into the Frisco Woodshop Guild at 6:25. Smelled like sawdust and linseed oil, the way every good shop does. 6 guys around a long bench, projects in various states of progress. The organizer, a retired electrician named Daryl, shook my hand at the door. "You said on the phone you've done this before, years back. Had a shop of my own. Had to give it up when I moved." Daryl nodded, handed me a pair of safety glasses. "Then you already know the best part." "What's that?" "Wood doesn't care who you are. It just answers to how you work it." I sat down, pulled the glasses on, picked up a piece of walnut that had been sitting on the bench waiting. Ran my thumb along the grain, found the angle of the light, and got to work. I wasn't useful to anybody's schedule in that room. Wasn't filling a role or managing somebody else's evening. Just present, hands on wood, mind on the work in front of me. That was enough. More than enough. Looking back now, here's what I understand. I confuse being needed with being loved. They can live in the same house, the two of them. In a healthy family, they usually do. But they aren't the same thing, and when one quietly replaces the other, what's left isn't family anymore. It's a job dressed up in family clothes. I spent 3 months cooking and cleaning and making myself smaller because I'd mixed up the fact of being useful with the feeling of belonging. After Carol died, after the house on Linden Court went quiet, and there were no job sites left needing me at 7 in the morning, I'd mistaken the weight of being depended on for the warmth of being wanted. It took an ultimatum, blunt as it was, to finally show me those two things had come apart a long time ago. I don't regret going down to Frisco. I don't regret those 3 months. Not entirely. They taught me something I needed to know about myself, that I still had it in me to walk out of a situation that wasn't right, even at 61, even with nowhere obvious to land. If you're in something that's been quietly asking you to be smaller than you actually are, you don't have to make a speech about it. You don't have to win the argument. Sometimes you just pick up the suitcase, steady and quiet, and go.